Hey there, Ryan Reynolds here. It's a new year, and you know what that means. No, not the diet. Resolutions. A way for us all to try and do a little bit better than we did last year. And my resolution, unlike big wireless, is to not be a raging and raise the price of wireless on you every chance I get. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited. See mintmobile.com for details.
Hello and welcome to the Plant School Podcast. I'm Rachel Tenney, and here we learn all about plants, how they work, how to care for them, and it's all taught in a way that anyone, from beginner to expert, can listen to, understand, and enjoy. So I hope that you will join me in Plant School. Hello, so glad to have you here today at the Plant School Podcast. I am so excited for today's episode. If you've been listening, you kind of know that I love the language of flowers. I mention quite often that one of my favorite books is called The Language of Flowers by S. Teresa Dietz, and I always refer to it in my Care Guide episodes. So when today's guest reached out and they had created a whole deck of cards, a tarot deck of cards, based around the language of flowers, I was very intrigued. And it was fascinating to talk with today's guest. His name is Kevin Jay Stanton, to talk about how he's created something beautiful, all revolving around the language of flowers. I hope you guys really enjoyed today's interview. Before I jump into it, I'm going to do what I always do, which is announce my 2 giveaway winners. So if you're new here, this is what we do. Every single episode, we have a fun little giveaway. What you win as a giveaway winner is a package from Market Botany. They will send you a bottle of their prop drops, which is like a water propagation aid. You just drop a few drops into some water, stick in your propagation cuttings, and it's wonderful. And then they also send you a bottle of their leaf shine, which I also love. And how to enter in is I take one giveaway winner from someone who has left a comment on the most recent episode on Spotify. So if that's where you're listening, scroll down on this episode, leave a little comment, and normally I'll ask a question verbally in the episode that you can reply to in your comment. So for today's episode, if you would like to, you can comment whatever you'd like, but if you'd like to answer the question I'm asking, I want to hear your thoughts about the language of flowers. Do you believe in a plant symbolism, and is that something that speaks to you? And then I also take a winner from someone who has left a review on Apple Podcasts. So if you're listening on Apple, you can leave a review for this podcast and you are automatically entered in to win the giveaway. I do this because those are the 2 main listening platforms that you guys are on. So I want to cater to both of those. So let's get into today's winners. Last episode was all about variegation. And I asked you guys if you owned any variegated houseplants. A lot of you shared what you own, and a lot of you just popped in to say hello in the comments. Thank you to everyone who commented. I love hearing from you guys. So today's winner, I need to count and make sure I'm getting the right number from my random number generator. All right, today's winner is Jordan Kelsey. They said, I love your podcast, and I love the information you provide. Thank you, Jordan, for your comment. And Jordan, if you would email me at tennyplants@gmail.com, TENNEY plants@gmail.com. I'll get your giveaway package sent your way. And real quick, let's do our winner from Apple Podcasts. Our winner today, their username is JillyBeansD4. They said, I enjoy listening to this podcast, not only because it is very informative, but Rachel is very calming to listen to. I have learned so much and look forward to future episodes. Thank you so much for that kind review. I hope you will continue to look forward to future episodes. If you will email me at tennyplants@gmail.com as well, I will go ahead and get your giveaway package on your way to you. And I just want to say a quick thank you to everyone listening for being here, for supporting this small podcast about plants. I really hope you guys enjoyed today's interview. One of my favorite parts is being able to connect with other people. And Kevin was just a very sweet and kind soul, and I loved getting to talk to him and get to know him, and I hope that you will too. And also, I forgot to mention that any links that we talk about during this episode, I will put them down below in the show notes. For example, we talk about Kevin's Kickstarter project that he's doing. You can find the link to that, his Instagram, things like that, in case you want to keep up with him and follow along. I know his Kickstarter project is going until February 24th, and by the end of this interview, you just may want to check it out. In fact, I'm looking at it right now, and he has achieved more than double his Kickstarter goal, which just goes to show how well loved his creation is. You may just feel the same by the end of this interview. I personally think what he has created is really special. Obviously, other people do as well from this Kickstarter, but I just wanted to put that out there before I started this in case you want to look into supporting him or following along his journey. All right, today I'm so excited for this. We have the opportunity to hear from Kevin Jay Stanton. And on Plant School, I've had the opportunity to kind of interview a lot of entrepreneurs and explore different careers in the green world. And for me, it's really a highlight for the podcast, just being able to talk with these people. So today, like I said, we're going to be interviewing Kevin Jay Stanton. He is the creator of a tarot card deck about the language of flowers. And Kevin, he is a green-thumbed amateur botanist. He's very passionate about ecology, environmentalism, and of course, tarot cards.
Mm,
And so currently, you created this new expanded deck called Botanica Full Bloom. It's coming out and it's featuring these 33 new oracle cards exploring pollinators and seed carriers. I'm so excited. We're going to talk about
yay,
all of
okay.
this, of course. But my first question for you, Kevin, is when did you first become interested in plants and just like the green world in general?
Well, thank you for having me, by the way. I'm very excited to talk to you about this. But ever since I was a kid, I don't know if I would say my grandmother was like a huge gardener per se, but she did have a lovely garden where I sort of grew up in New Jersey, northern New Jersey.
Mm.
And so, yeah, my grandmother had this beautiful garden. And I remember her giving me like cuttings of some of her houseplants. I have a jade that I've been growing for a really long time from her original cuttings. My mom and my aunt, in particular, one of my aunts, are also big gardeners. So it's kind of always been like on my periphery. But I also remember as a kid when I lived in DC, going to museums and being really enamored with like essentially botanical art, but they were like beautiful paintings that prominently featured flowers.
And I took a look at your website and all of your art projects you have on there.
Mm,
You're an amazing artist.
thank
Like
you.
I was so blown away. I honestly I was like looking at your shop. I was like, I want to buy all these
That's very
all these
sweet of you.
enamel
Thank you.
pins and all this stuff. And I'm excited because we're going to talk a little bit more about how you created it. But I
Mm,
first want to ask you what tarot cards are because
mm.
I have absolutely zero
Oh, sure.
experience with them. When I looked them up, a lot of people said that they would kind of use them for self reflection, as a way to meditate. And so
Yeah.
I want to hear from you, what are tarot cards and like what is their purpose really?
I think there are a lot of different, it's probably like each person you ask would give like a different answer. I've been really interested in them for a long time. There was actually like a magic, like an esoteric shop. I keep saying where I grew up, but I was a military brat, so it's all over the place. But in Virginia, where I spent most of my childhood, there was an esoteric shop, and I met somebody who was a tarot card reader, and I remember she's eating ice cream and telling me how to read tarot like outside the shop.
It's amazing.
But yeah, for me, the main draw is they're very symbolic cards. The traditional Waite-Smith tarot cards are it's 78 cards. It's sort of I would say like it's not the only tarot cards, but it is kind of like understood to be the general like understanding of them. The imagery is like chock full of symbols that are connected to a bunch of like new age things and things older than that as well. Some people believe that they can be a divination tool that like in the hands of the right person, they can predict the future. For me, I do use them as like a tool of self-reflection. I think it's interesting when you either for yourself or you're reading for somebody else, even if a card is like wrong, quote unquote, I think it's interesting to be like, what is the emotional response to that card, and what does that like maybe unlock? And I've had experiences where if I've done a reading for somebody or sometimes for myself, it almost gives you if you're like avoiding something and it comes up in the cards, it's almost like an external force in a way that's telling you like, okay, but come on. And then it almost gives
Yeah.
you permission to be like, yeah, I probably should. I should be thinking about that more. Um,
Yeah. Time to figure it out.
right. Yeah. I've heard Botanica in particular is like a very blunt but gentle deck. And certainly when I was writing the meanings of a lot of the cards, I personally needed somebody to be very blunt with me where I was in like the certain position of my life. And so it's very funny to see how like the way I created the deck comes through in the way people also are getting their readings. But
That's really cool. Is it pretty common to have multiple tarot card decks? Also, I
oh yeah.
realized I've been saying
Oh,
tarot
no, that's
with a hard
yeah, no,
T.
and a lot of people do. I think there are definitely people who are collectors. I don't think I would call myself a collector, but I do have quite a collection. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think they're beautiful art objects. I think that's one of the reasons, like, a lot of artists get drawn to making their own. They're full of, as I said, like, the Waite Smith deck has such evocative imagery that I think that also has a big draw for artists. Yeah, I definitely think people tend to be collectors. I mean, I say I'm not a collector as though I do not have at least 5 decks in the other room that are I have never opened, but I bought because they were so beautiful. Yeah,
I love that you appreciate the art of
love the
them.
art. Yeah.
Correct that there's like a major and a minor.
Mhm.
Is it like different cards that are major
Yeah.
and minor?
So
Okay.
basically, tarot has suits. Like actually, playing cards and tarot have a common ancestor. Did a bunch of random research, not even for Botanica, for a completely different card deck. But they basically both have an ancestor in like Chinese playing cards that made their way west. And then it was like the paper version of, I want to say dominoes, don't quote me on that, but essentially playing cards, the 4 suits that are in playing cards are also in tarot. But there's one additional card in tarot for those suits. And then the majors are almost like a 5th suit in a way, and they represent more like more themes, whereas minor arcana, the cards in there tend to be kind of specific. The major arcana are kind of like more elemental, more broad, more powerful in some ways. And then you get to Botanica, and I add 3 more suits. It's a lot of cards.
That's
Cool.
fun though.
Yeah, no, it's fun.
So you said that you were taught tarot in an
Mm.
ice cream shop,
Oh,
right?
no,
Is that kind of where
not in an ice
Oh,
cream shop. I was taught by it was like I don't know how to describe it. I believe it was called esoterica, but it was like a magic shop. But
okay,
the
okay, a
tarot
magic shop.
reader was eating ice cream.
Gotcha,
Yeah.
gotcha. Was that kind of like where it started for you, your like
Ooh.
tarot journey and how you got intrigued by it?
I think I was always kind of interested. The reason she taught me a little bit is I had just bought a deck. I think I don't know where it originally started, but I've always had a real interest in like symbolism. A lot of games I play have a lot of magic in them as well, so I'm sure that there's kind of like an overlap. But yeah, I don't know. When she taught me a little bit, there's kind of like you introduce yourself to a new deck when you open it. And there's a bunch of different ways that people do that. But it was the first time anybody had sort of walked me through, yeah, the introduction, sort of like the protocol that can be in a lot of tarot. And it was really interesting to think of it as less of a deck of cards and more of, I guess, more like personal in a way, to speak to something. Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm actually wondering if there's something with, gosh, what is the name of it? It's the Madeline L'Engle books. There's a character in it where he's not in a great domestic situation, but he speaks to a plant and it grows well when he speaks to it. There's a lot of like magic plant symbolism. There's a lot, it's all in there as a child, but yeah.
I like it though, because I feel like symbolism is a huge thing that speaks to me.
Mm.
One of my favorite books that I talk about all the time on this podcast, it's called The Language of Flowers.
Oh.
And so it doesn't happen very often, but if I want to send like my spouse a message,
Mm.
sometimes I will pick a flower with a certain
Oh,
meaning
yeah.
and leave it for him. Embarrassingly, I have to tell him at what page number to figure out what it means.
Who's the author?
Her name it's S. Teresa Dietz.
Oh, I don't know if I know this one specifically.
It's like a really pretty book, and it's really comprehensive. I think
Mm.
that's why I like it. It goes through so many different
I'll
plants.
have to look it up because
So
I mean, Botanica is based on the language of flowers. Not
yes,
that
yeah.
specific book, I will have to check it out, but yeah, just kinda like Victorian floriography. Yeah,
Yeah,
how exciting.
and that I think Floriography is actually another book
It
about the
is,
language of
yeah.
flowers,
Mhm.
speaking of.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
So I wanna ask you, with all of that symbolism, how did this, like, all start the idea of creating Botanica?
Mm,
I'm sure it was kind of a long process because each card is your artwork, like,
mm,
it is beautiful, and I wanna hear about how did this idea come about
mm.
and the process of it all?
Thank you. Yeah, like I said, I think it's sort of like the white whale of a lot of art kids. And when I was in college, I'd started a deck that I think I did 3 cards from. And basically, I always wanted to make a floral deck. I had a deck growing up that was all about like herbal qualities mixed with tarot, but it focused a lot more on the traditional imagery, like adding plants into it. And I always wanted to find a way to sort of like flip that proportion a little bit. And so, yeah, I tried 2 different decks prior to that. One, I made 3 cards of maybe 5, and then another, I literally made one. I was like, I'm done with this. And then a few years, maybe like 5 years out of college, I was doing a show, just like a group gallery show, and they invited us to contribute a few pieces. And I had this idea of like a small set that was specifically about essentially like the magic in flowers, but that focused on just the floral imagery. And it was kind of like giving myself permission to do that focus. Sounds so strange to say now, especially because my work is so heavily dominated by botanical imagery. But there was a time that an art director had told me that like if I only worked on floral imagery, then I would not have a career. And I don't think he was wrong in terms like I really wanted to do editorial illustration, and I don't know how I could have ever done plans for
Yeah.
every piece, but because of that, I started to strip away a lot of the things I loved in art. And so
Mhm.
starting that project was kind of like putting it back in. And then when I had that small set done, I essentially already had maybe 3 to 5 cards done. So I started to work them into a deck. And then I was already like farther along than I had been, 5 years prior. And all of those cards made it into Botanica except for one because it didn't work.
Oh,
Now
wow.
looking back, I'm like, could I have not? Could I really have not made that a card? Why do I always have to make more work for myself? But yeah, that's kind of where it started.
So this was, like, about a 5-year process then, or was it a little bit longer
Ultimately,
than that?
this would have been, I want to say I started those first cards in 2014, 2015, maybe late 2014. And then I started to like slowly work on them about like one a month for a while. It was part of an online gallery. And that's what I would sell is like a new tarot card, just of the
Mhm.
major arcana for like once a month. And then took a break for work stuff and then ended up going back. Yeah, we launched in March 2020. So on
Wow.
and off for like 5 years, which is, I'd say it's crazy, but that is exactly how Full Bloom came around too. So
I love it. Okay, so your publisher is Beehive Book. And what I want to know is, were they there at the like beginning of this journey, or did they come later towards the end when you were more into this artwork?
they came in pretty late. I want to say, I think it was the same year. I think it was 2020. I was pretty resolute about doing the cards myself, like launching the deck. I hadn't even finished the deck at that point. I want to say I maybe had, gosh, 30 or 40 cards done at that point. This would have been maybe January 2020. The only reason I kind of know is I was visiting New York in like December to January 2020. And I visited my friend Mael Dolavu, who is slash kind of used to be one half of Beehive. And Mael had been like, you should let us publish this. Like, please let us publish this. And I was like, respectfully, no. And then when I think she was the last person I saw before I went home. And then she sent me an email after I'd gotten home that was like, I talked to Josh. Josh O'Neill is the other half of Beehive. And like, we think we could do a really good job. And I was like, I'll think about it. And I did. And it seemed like a really good opportunity. And in the end, it was phenomenal.
Was there a reason why you felt a little hesitant in the beginning about saying yes to Beehive Books?
Oh, stuff with publishing gets tricky, and I thought it would have been like with any publisher, and this was not the case with Beehive. Beehive really let me do a lot of like the steering on Botanica, but my worry with any publisher is that I wouldn't have as much say. Well, I don't know. I guess like the overall direction, and I think that is true with a lot of like major publishers potentially. There's a lot more people involved, but now it's been so long that I'm not even I'm not even sure why I said no. I remember saying no, but yeah, I think that was my worry, and then also potentially I could have made more if I did it on that own. But no, I mean we'll talk about the campaign, but like I certainly don't think that that would have proven true. And I was very very happy that just in general I was kind of like leading the charge on the direction and the meanings and all of that for Botanica. Just because I at that point I'd spent so much time on it that I was like, I don't know why I wouldn't just do it on
Yeah, that makes sense. You don't, want the publisher taking over a project that you feel really passionately about and doing something with it maybe that you wouldn't have liked as the artist. That makes sense.
yeah. My role was really incredible and I would say very much brought out like the best of what I could have done and then also did way beyond that.
I was reading though too that you guys were like the best-selling tarot card deck for a while.
Yeah. No, it's been very nice. I don't think it's still the case, but when we launched it, like broke the record for Kickstarter. And then I think there was a deck that came like like literally right afterwards and completely torpedoed it. But no, it really Botanica, I think is strange to say, because it's a deck about plants. But for me, as I said, like at one point stripping plants out of my work and then to have something that is so exclusively about plants is really personal. And I was also not like in this is probably one of the reasons I was going to say no to Beehive is like I wasn't in a great position. I just moved back from a year in the UK. And so I really thought like if Botanica wasn't a success, and it was March 2020, so things were stacked against it. But I really thought if it didn't make its funding of I think it was 30,000 that I would have to like seriously consider changing careers just because something I'd spent so long on. Yeah, if it hadn't gone the distance, I was like, okay, well, we did our best.
I'm so glad it did go the distance and did so well because truly, like your deck, it's beautiful. It's a work of art, and I feel like it'd be a disservice if it didn't make it out into the world. It seems like a lot of people truly enjoy it.
Thank you so much. That's very sweet.
So I wanted to ask you, what kind of made you like decide to do your tarot card deck based upon like the language of flowers and the symbolism? Was it just something you've always been drawn to, or was it like a little bit you wanted to kind of stick it to the man when you were told that you couldn't do botanical art for a career?
It was like I wish I could say spite was never a part of that, but I'd be lying. No, I don't know. It's just something that is so ever present in my it's really hard to say. I want to say I don't believe in well, a little bit of magic, but I do. I find it so fascinating the way throughout history, like truly throughout all of humans' history, humanity has gravitated towards symbols. When it comes to plants, they're things that have we've literally grown alongside. And for humans for so long to have taken things that were useful, useful to our sustenance, but then also recognize their like beauty and then start to build like ancient Greek myths have so many stories of like this tragedy led to the creation of this flower, as though it needed that, and yet like humanity loves to create these stories. And I can't help but feel the specialness in that. And so yeah, I wish I were a little more, I don't know, I've always found that so interesting. I love the idea of being able to take on like the magic of plants in that way, like to take a symbol, like more generally, like a symbol of an evil eye and like bring on the feeling of like protection that comes with that. Or yeah, I don't know. There's some like majestic quality to symbolism in that way, like amulets of protection and jewelry where it's like woven in, that has like always spoken to me. And I think it's like the level of like magic in that part between fantasy and video games and human history, like some weird amalgamation that I've always been drawn to. So yeah, Botanica, being able to like solely focus on that was really, I always describe it as like a giving myself permission to explore something that is like so close to my heart. So yeah, that's kind of that's kind of why.
I love it. And would you mind like sharing one of your cards and the symbolism behind it and how you came about to find that symbolism?
Yeah. One of the ones that really felt like a breakthrough in that early process. See if I can find it. Originally, I was just kind of doing, like we talked about, like the language of flowers, where for various reasons, like a camp symbolizes like sort of like artistic ingenuity. But there are things like ironwood is such a dense wood that it takes on the ability of like strength and everything. That was a really obvious one for the strength card. But the one that really, because I was doing them one at a time, that really like turned something in my head was the death card. Because in tarot, death is, it's not about like an ending per se, it's like a card of cycles. And in Botanica, it's the lodgepole pine, but basically it's a pine tree that cannot spread its seeds except in a wildfire. Like the chemical process of the seeds enduring a wildfire is what like cracks them open so that new pine trees can grow. And so you can kind of see like in here too, there's a closed pine cone and an open cone, kind of also talking about like the cycles. But there was a real turning point in my head where I felt like not only was I looking at Victorian flower language, I was starting to like think about my own, both the scientific but personal symbolism that I could bring to the deck, which was really fun. And also the plant that figures most heavily on the cards is, I don't know if you can see it, but it's dandelions, because I made the Fool into dandelions because the Fool card represents like someone at the start of a journey, sort of like the naivete of youth, and like when you're starting a journey, everything is like fun and flirty and weird, unburdened. And so I thought that something that both represents like childish wishes, but also the mode of travel that dandelion seeds have was kind of a perfect fit. And then yeah, I ended up making it the motif for all of the deck. It's all over everything. It's even on the new box. But yeah, it's those kind of things where I felt like I could start making my, it's strange. Again, I made the whole deck, but I felt like I could make my mark also on the deck and be able to back it up. That got me really excited.
Yeah, and as I was looking at your website and some of the different decks, I saw that one of them had like a little book that came with it. I believe it was called a compendium, and it like went through all of the symbolism of each of the cards and the plants that was on them, and I thought that that was really cool.
Yeah, it goes through as much as we could get into it. This is the new one. And then like the all tarot decks really come with what is affectionately called the Little White Book. So this is like easy reading for, if you're like doing a reading for somebody. But I was very excited to do the compendium for both editions because it goes into more of I love to talk about Botanica, obviously, but go into like why I made it, my thought process on both creating it and like the things that I chose and the reasons I chose them. And it's been very rewarding that in addition to like liking the art, which has been very sweet, I've heard a lot of people have a really strong response to the research that I put into the cards as well. So it's been very edifying.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that because as I was, preparing for this interview and looking at your tarot card decks, I feel like that's what I had a strong response to. All the research that you've put into these cards, not only the art side, but the meaning behind the cards that you've so thoughtfully put in just makes the tarot card deck all the more special. And though I'm like not even involved in the tarot card world at all, it makes me want to be because of what you've created.
Oh, that's very sweet.
Yeah, I think you've made something really special and I think a lot of people can just they really see that for what it is.
Thank you.
And I wanted to ask you, so you have this new expanded Botanica tarot card deck, Botanica Full Bloom coming out, and it has these 33 new oracle cards. I want to ask you, what are oracle cards and like what is their purpose?
Oracle decks are, I guess they're sort of an alternative to tarot in a way. I think in a lot of ways they serve the same purpose. Tarot cards, I want to say, like, there's no real wiggle room. There are 78 cards. They have specific, there's cups, swords, coins, and wands. They have very specific cards in the major and minor arcana. Oracle cards have none of that. Now, they can really be whatever the maker wants them to be. And so in that way, they can have a completely different focus. I think tarot tends to be about like situations, future, it can be like the past, whatever. Oracle decks I know there's like a very popular like angel themed Oracle deck. They can be very like open-ended. And in that way, I think they can also be very more meditative. And yeah, this Oracle decks really can be anything, which is fascinating and daunting when you're making one. It was the a process of completely manic energy. Beehive had talked to me in maybe late 2020, maybe early 2021. They'd basically been like, if you ever want to, expand Botanica, let me know. And they said like, yeah, we could do like 20 new cards. And I said originally like, I don't want to add to Botanica just to add to it. Like, Oracle cards are very much free form. And so, yeah, I ended up I don't know if I can ever explain what my thought process looked like. At one point, I was doing 7 new suits. There was 7 new suits, and each one of them, they all had different numbers of cards. I think one of them had 11, and then one of them had 3, and then they were like prime numbers in between. It was wild, and it was, um, but I ended up doing a close friend of mine commissioned me for his mom to do a painting of like essentially her garden, but in the style of Botanica. And so it was, and daisies, and then it also had bees and butterflies. And I added like pollen into the background. And that's when things really clicked. Similar to like symbolism, there's a phenomenon. Well, it's not a phenomenon. It's like a classification, but they're called pollination syndromes. And it's like a rough approximation of types of flowers grouped by what pollinates them. And there is it's not scientific, like it's not hard fact, like white flowers attract specific, but there's a lot to it. Like purple and red flowers can be very attractive to butterflies in particular. And plants that like bloom at night are usually white flowers. sometimes have a musky scent to them, sometimes can actually like warm their blossoms, and they attract like moths and bats. Anyway, so I've had a long time fascination with pollination syndromes. And that's when it kind of clicked is I was like, oh, I could do the deck and incorporate like relationships with plants and animals. And then it was much harder. Pollination, easy. That suit was like that. It was the other stuff that was a bit harder. But yeah, that was kind of the impetus. I was like, well, I'll just do three new suits that are based on, and they are essentially like the meanings are a lot about relationships by way of plants interacting with animals.
And these oracle cards, are you using them with like the major and minor arcana cards as well? Or are you kind of using them separately?
Yeah, you can do. We have like a new reading type where it just uses the full bloom cards. But yeah, my hope is that I mean it's a lot of cards. It's 111 cards. Even with Botanica, I like shuffle them in halves and then overlap. But yeah, I think it'll be really fun to put these 33 new cards into a reading and kind of see what comes out. That hopefully like gives a bit more, I don't know, like a bit more information about what you're looking for.
That's interesting. Okay, this next question, and I'm not even sure if this is like something you're comfortable with, but I'm gonna go ahead and see. Would you be willing to do like a small tarot card reading for me?
I will tell you, I'm not good at reading strangers. No, I generally do a reading for one of my best friends has me do readings for us on New Year's. I do it for me, my boyfriend, and my friend Melissa. But it's harder again because I use it as like a psychological tool. It's harder when you're like, what is your work life like?
Yeah, it's like, who are you?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I could shuffle some of these cards. I don't. This is like the sample deck I have that really just shows the foil. So I don't know how many. I feel like it's mostly just major arcana, but I could give you like a sample if you want me to shuffle some cards and we can draw a random one and see.
Okay, yeah, let's just try it. Let's see how this goes.
All right. I've just I'll give you the big caveat. I don't know what's in this deck, and I just grabbed a bunch of them. So I don't even know if like the full bloom is in this. But let's go for it. What do you? Oh, I should ask it because we're doing this for real as a test. So what would you? We'll do like a one card reading. Like, what's your question? What do you want to know?
Hmm. Trying to think of like what would be a good question to ask. What kind of questions are like normal when doing a tarot card reading?
I tend to when we do our yearly ones, I will ask like what does the coming year look like for me? Because I usually do it's a 10 card spread. So it'll be kind of like something that is affecting you now. What is like a foundational card that represents where you're coming from? What are your like hopes and fears around this question? And then like what is the culmination? For one card readings, I think a lot of people didn't do like a daily reading a lot of times. That'll be like what is my day going to be like? Or you could ask a specific question like what if you have a project you're thinking of, or what do I think the outcome of that would be? I don't know. What are you thinking of?
Hmm. I don't know. So my problem is I just have too many questions in my head. But okay, here's one. What is something I should be cautious of?
Oh, that's a good okay, yeah, that's a good tarot question. This is tricky over video, but I'll show you more.
Sorry, I'm probably like pushing the limits of tarot card reading here.
No, no, you're friendly, so it's easier. Um, all right, so I'm gonna show you. Normally, you do like three cut decks, and then I don't have three hands, so I'm going to have you choose one of these.
Okay, let's do the one on the left.
This one. Oh, interesting. Okay, so you got the world, which is quince. I picked quince because some people think that it's the original golden apple in Hesperides' garden, but also maybe the apple in the Garden of Eden. Quince is like the predecessor. We still have it, obviously, but it basically like apples and pears are kind of from the quince itself. Okay. When I think of this card in particular, I usually think of it as like travel, like the good thing. So basically, the world is the last card of the major arcana. So if the Fool is the start of a journey, quince is like the journey about to begin again, usually like with good luck. Don't like to worry about something or like what you should avoid. I guess the only reading I think that would fit would be to avoid or like be cautious of stagnating, like be cautious of inertia, or to try and avoid like the lack of like a satisfying ending to something. Does that have any like bearing on kind of what you're thinking about?
I'm trying to think because I feel like it kind of applies in multiple ways. So for me, I'm like a very deeply religious person, right? And so the big picture, like the eternal picture, is something that's kind of always on my mind. And that progression process of working towards, like the end goal of basically living with God again, right? Getting to heaven. That's something that is always on my mind, really, and what I'm working towards. And perhaps I just need to be cautious of, you know, being stagnant in that effort, being caught up in other things that maybe like don't matter as much, that can maybe be distracting for that deeply personal goal that I have for myself.
Interesting. Huh. Yeah, I think if that's something you're thinking about a lot, that's an interesting card to pull for like the bigger picture. And in some ways, like that is kind of the world's meaning, is like the bigger picture of like again the cycle kind of starting again.
Yeah,
Cool.
I like that. That was really cool. I can see why people like to use tarot cards for self-reflection.
Yeah. That's the thing is I think it's cool to like think about like the card in terms of like if I'm not drawing the actual like, the future, like reading the future in the cards, like what is this making me think about? Like what is this? It is like an external permission in a way, like thinking about what a card is telling you. It's strange in that way, but I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, I agree. Like I said, I've like never done tarot before, but
Mm.
Kevin, like I'm sold. I loved it. And I think
Thank you.
it's so cool and special that you've created these cards that revolve around the language of flowers and offer a way for people to like deeply connect to them in a way maybe they thought they couldn't have.
Yeah, it's so cool. It truly is like something, and I get to learn so much along the way too, like things that I never would have thought of, which I really loved.
Yeah. Okay, so if people would like to keep up with you and your art and when Botanica Full Bloom is coming out, where can they
Mm.
find all of that?
The campaign for Botanica Full Bloom drops on January 22nd at noon. It's on Kickstarter. So I think if you just like Google Botanica Full Bloom Kickstarter, it's probably there. My work is at kevinjaystanton.com. And if you follow me at Kevin J. Stanton anywhere on social media, I will probably be yelling about this deck for 30 days. Yeah, that's probably the best places.
Well, I know that I will be following you along there.
Thank you so much.
And thank you so much, Kevin, for coming on and just
My pleasure.
opening up this whole new beautiful world that I honestly knew nothing about.
Well, thank you. I got to look up this new book too.
Yes, it's a good one. But thank you just so much for coming on, for sharing your passion about Botanica and what you've created with it, with the language of flowers and your tremendous talent for the art too. I think what you have created is just something really special, and I'm so glad that you shared it with us today.
Thank you so much, Rachel.
Thank you so much for being here and for listening to the Plant School podcast. I hope that you will join me for our next episode. And if you would like to support this podcast and keep it going, there's a link down in the show notes of this episode where you can donate to this podcast. And I really appreciate all that help. Or you can go to my merch store, which is also linked in the notes of this episode. And you can find some really cool plant-related shirts and stickers. And if you want to support the podcast but spend no money, feel free to share it with a friend, leave a review. All these things greatly help me out and allow me to keep doing this. Again, thank you so much for listening and for being here at the Plant School podcast.